latest news, national issues, the political scene, and conversations with prominent personalities. All these firsthand at the forefront. Good morning. I am Attorney Karen Jimeno. Last week, a Quezon City Regional Trial Court has acquitted former DOH Secretary and now Iloilo 1st District Representative Janette Garin and several others on the Dengvaxia controversy. The court found the testimonies of 3 doctors inadmissible as they were not real experts. The Volunteers Against Crime and Corruption, however, says that the dismissed Dengvaxia case is just the first set of complaints hurled against Congresswoman Garin. Is the Dengvaxia mess really over? Joining us this morning is Deputy Majority Leader and Iloilo 1st District Representative, Dr. Janette Garin. Good morning, Congresswoman Janette.
Good morning, Attorney Karen.
So let's start with the case. The Regional Trial Court has acquitted you and several others for the death of around 8 children because of the administration of an anti-dengue vaccine called Dengvaxia. Can you give us the details of this case?
Well, basically, we knew that the case was directed to be dismissed in the first place simply because it was based on what they call fake documents, fake autopsies. And the experts that were being presented in the media before were really non-experts. In fact, this is not the first batch of cases that were dismissed because there were a few children whom we have proven to be unvaccinated. And that was actually our first question, like why are we talking about the impact, the effect of the vaccine on patients who were actually not vaccinated? So there was actually a policeman, the family was claiming it was leptospirosis. There was another doctor who died of an infectious disease not related to dengue. And there were children who died of ruptured appendicitis. But then the documents were falsified as if to let it appear that they were vaccinated. And then this batch of first 8 cases that actually went through proper trials. And of course, they presented an alleged expert, Dr. Tony Liachon, who was claiming that the children and adults, that the children is a miniature of adults, and he was also testifying that he pressed and touched the bodies of the alleged victims. But I mean, that is not the way how to do it, and he was not able to present documents related to his claim of his expertise. Moreover, there were actually issues on the term neurotropic-like and viscerotropic-like illness as the cause of the death, because these 2 terminologies are non-existent in medical parlance. So in the court, they were asked to present a proof that these 2 terms are in existence. And it boiled down to the office of the public attorney's office. I think it was Dr. Erfe who coined this term, and I can't really remember well it was a series of hearings. Now, where are we going? Yes, it's not yet the end because they filed a lot of cases. Some are still pending before the Department of Justice. There's again 1 batch pending before the courts. But if you take a look at the actual events, these cases that have been filed happened during the time of then former Secretary Ubial. These were in latter part of 2016 and in 2017, where I was not the Secretary of Health anymore, and where the certificate of exemption was actually issued by Secretary Ubial. And it actually confused us because the Prosecutor General's office kept on filing cases against me, but at the same time dismissing cases against Duque and Ubial, who were both Duterte appointees. But these were all children who were vaccinated during their time. Mm-hmm. And at the time, even the exemption and all the documents were issued by my successor.
So basically, the cases were filed against you in your capacity as Health Secretary. Yes. That you served for about over a year.
Yes.
And the 3 experts here, you mentioned Dr. Erfe, and then Dr. Liachon, and there was another expert, Dr. Carito Cairo. Yeah. Did you have any working relationship with them during your term as Secretary of Health or previously?
None that I can remember. Dr. Cairo, I heard, was actually one of those assigned in the distribution of cancer drugs, because during my tenure as Secretary of Health, we were pushing for the procurement of chemotherapeutic drugs, and I believe this was one of the assignments of Dr. Cairo. Unfortunately, I think we had to change it because the medicines were not moving. And you know how it is. The Commission on Audit would always tell us medicines that are bought by the government should be immediately dispensed. So that's how it.
Would you know if any of these three doctors would have any personal motive to file a case against you or to testify against you?
Well, for Tony Lechon, he was very much interested to be the Secretary of Health. In fact, when we met and he conveyed that interest, I told him, like, I'm willing to talk to the former president in not accepting I was acting Secretary of Health at that time. So I was not yet a full-fledged Secretary of Health, not yet appointed and not yet confirmed. So I was willing to recommend him. Unfortunately, it was beyond my pay grade. No? The search committee had to deal with issues about his capability in heading the department. Because when you lead the department, you should be focused on the output, not on what you can, not on issues that will land you in the headlines, because these are two different things. So that's one. And second is their claymore against vaccines. Like I was trained in advanced vaccinology, and we believe that vaccination really saves lives. But of course, there is also a group who does not believe in vaccines and who believes that WHO, epidemiological numbers, vaccines, and medications are bad science. That we respect. But if we lead public health of a certain country, we have to really be focused on what is beneficial to the people. Mm-hmm. So basically, that's it.
Congresswoman Janette, Dr. Lechon also occupied the post of Special Advisor for Non-Communicable Diseases, but resigned briefly after holding that post. He was a guest here at the Forefront, and he seemed to imply that he was resigned because of pressure coming from you. Let's watch this clip.
By a physician after watching the budget hearing for the Department of Health. And of course, a congressman, a previous health secretary, questioned why Secretary Ted Arbosa appointed me as a non-communicable disease special advisor to the Department of Health, na hindi naman ako expert.
And he said that that comment came from you, that he was not an expert. Was there really any pressure coming from you not to appoint him?
It was not a pressure, it was a mere question, because he wanted to occupy a Director 4 position. And we all know that Director 4s are plantilla position, and let's say they would report to the office 8 hours a day on the call of the secretary. In other words, the position that he wanted to occupy, if my memory recalls, it was actually Director 4 for the Family Health Office, or the DPCB, the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau. So that position was being given to him, but then he was insisting that he's just a consultant, a special advisor. So a Director 4 is just like a regional director. So you cannot just be an advisor, but occupy the Director 4 position, which is actually a presidential appointee. So it's not a consultant position. He can be a consultant to the secretary, occupying a consultant position, but not a Director 4 position. But yes, I did ask if he's an expert, because there were doctors inside the Department of Health and even even PCP and the specialty society saying that he's not a diplomate. He trained in cardio, but he's not a diplomate. So there are a lot of diplomate and specialists and experts inside and outside the Department of Health. So these positions will have to go through the search committee. So I was not pinpointing it at him as a person, but I was talking about the morale of the whole Department of Health, because we have a lot of career officials there. We have a lot of Director 3 who we're expecting to be promoted to Director 4. There are a lot of applicants who have been with the department for a long, long time, and who are willing to report 8 in the morning until 5 in the evening, or up to the wee hours in the evening if the situation calls for it.
So in other words, he could have occupied a consultancy post.
Yes.
And Dr. Liachon also said
And just to correct,
yes,
he was not yet appointed. He kept on saying he was appointed and he resigned. But as far as we are concerned, he has not been appointed yet, because the Director 4 position is appointed by the President of the Philippines.
Okay. And he did say a lot also in terms of the leadership of the Department of Health. Let's take a look at the second clip.
I don't want to work under a spineless leader and a person without moral courage. I cannot work under that. So I resigned. Sabi ko, I'd rather work as an independent health reform advocate rather than work under a spineless, under someone without moral courage, someone with, integrity and honesty that can protect the Filipino people.
What are your thoughts on this? But that was directed at Secretary Ted Urbosa.
I think Liachon is just sour graping. I believe that's the problem with people who thinks sila lang ang magaling sa mundo. Because that attitude will bring you to nowhere. He appears to be claiming an expert on all aspects. Even during the Dengvaxia hearings, he was saying that a child is a miniature adult. That is a no-no in science. He was also claiming to know how to conduct an autopsy. And he was claiming a lot of expertise, which are actually not within the bounds of his expertise. So these statements about a spineless leader, a person who cannot lead the department, I believe these are just sour graping, because he's also one of the applicants. And I really do not understand why he keeps on pretending that he resigned, where in fact he was not appointed yet. But he did apply. He applied for a consultancy position. He kept on saying that he would like to be a 1 peso consultant, and that's not a problem. But if you are applying for a consultant position, but taking the item of a Director 4, heading the Disease Prevention and Control Bureau, that's a no-no, because that will make that office headless, spineless. So I believe it's sour graping. It's sour graping. And I mean, if there are a lot of things that a doctor can do, if you are a practicing physician, you will be kept busy. But things like this are actually unbecoming, because when you apply for a position, it can mean you will be taken in, but it can also mean you will not be taken in. The mere fact that he has presented himself as an expert, it's a self-proclaimed expert on many aspects, but the medical society is not calling him as such. In fact, in the courts, when he was asked to present proof of his expertise on vaccination, he presented an invitation and a photo with the former President Duterte and said, the mere fact that he was allowed to enter the premises of Malacanang makes him an expert. So this is not science.
We did ask him what his personal relationship was with you, and this is what Dr. Liachon said. Anything personal between you and Secretary Garin?
Well, I testified during the Senate hearing sa Blue Ribbon during the time of Senator Dick Gordon, and together with Dr. Tony Dance, Inday Dance, and Professor Mary Ann Lansang. And during the time, as a pharmaceutical medicine expert, because I worked in the corporate world before, I know how it is. So we think there was a, of course in the courts right now, after Ombudsman, RTC, right now it's in the Sandigan Bayan. So hopefully it's not a sub judice. But just for clarity, I said during the, and it's in the public right now, that there was a premature approval of the certificate of product registration because the safety trials were not.
For which, what are we talking about?
For the drug Dengvaxia.
Okay.
And then it was approved on December 22 of 2015. And when they ordered the vaccine, it was available in 1 month's time. I mean, ang bilis naman. And they injected this to school kids, to 1 million kids. And then hundreds ang namatay doon. And then, after 1 year, the global Sanofi announced that this particular drug is only after the, of course, paglabas ng trials, it will only be used kung na-expose ka na to dengue, that's seropositive, and it cannot be used for seronegative. Eh lahat yun, pinagbibigyan nila without even pre-testing whether the patient was exposed to dengue. A drug na launched into the market should be in the market first for 1 year. It should not be in the National Drug Formulary kasi kalo-launch lang siya. Now, if it is proven and safe, a-apply ka in the PNDF. And who's the head of the PNDF? That's Secretary Garin.
So is there anything personal between the two of you, or do you think that Dr. Leachon is really convinced that there was something wrong?
I have nothing personal against Tony Leachon. It's just that he always wants to land in the headlines, even during meetings with doctors. That is his usual mantra. He would always want a topic that would end him in the headlines, or being interviewed, or being asked by the media, or coming out in the TV or in the newspaper. That's his dream, and that makes him happy. And I believe he picked on me as one of those that he can drag into interviews and into situations where he can be interviewed. Parang pag pinatulan ko at pag sinabi niya sa akin, then it can land him on media, and that's what he likes. But like, look at that interview. He kept on saying that he's a pharmaceutical expert. Why? Just because he worked for Pfizer? Let's say if I work for Billionario, that does make me a media or a PR expert. Ano ba ang trabaho niya doon? Di ba, was he promoting products? So how can he be a pharmaceutical expert? When he kept on saying in the media and even in the courts that he's a pharma expert because he submits application to FDA. So even the one selling pandesal, even the one selling toyo and patis would submit documents to FDA for application. That does not make you an expert. So he's a pathological liar. No? He's a self-proclaimed expert on many aspects. And he keeps on picking on me because, coming from being a former secretary and being a politician would land him on the news. So ang daming kasinungalingan dun sa mga pinagsasabi niya. He also mentioned that I am the head of the PNDF. No, I am not. The Secretary of Health approves or disapproves the recommendation of the Formulary Executive Council as it's a ministerial, well, you approve or disapprove the recommendation of the FEC. But what does the FEC does? The Formulary Executive Council was actually created by virtue of the generics law. When you talk about safety and efficacy of medicines, vaccines, or even medical devices and even food, this is a mantra of the Food and Drug Authority. So yung sinasabi niyang, kasi dapat ganito, may testing. Actually, there's no testing kit available in the market up to this point of time. And when Sanofi Pasteur made the declaration that those who were vaccinated has to be tested, it was supposed to be done after 2.5 to 3 years. Because if you are a patient who has not had dengue yet, then it actually calls for a booster dose. That's how we understand vaccinology. Pero kapag ikaw ay positibo at nagka-dengue na at nabakunahan, the protection is lifetime, as it is now. And he was also saying that it has to be in the market for 1 year before it can be listed in the PNDF. That does not happen. Being listed in the PNDF actually means applying before the PNDF. However, kasi matagal yun eh. Matagal ang deliberation ng FEC because they are consultants who are not reporting regularly in the Department of Health. So what they actually do is to make sure that the cost, it's in generic terminologies, and the cost is not high. So they would usually have a cost efficiency study where the impact of that intervention will have an impact on the reduction of the cost of that public health illness. Kunyari, yung mga na-ospital, yung mga nawala ng trabaho, yung mga namamatay dahil sa sakit na ito at paano ito mapipigilan. Kung kailangan yan, it's listed in the PNDF. However, it has been ministerial on the Department of Health, the Secretary, to keep on signing certificate of exemption. Hindi lang naman Dengvaxia ang humingi ng exemption, taon-taon, buwan-buwan, ang daming pinipirmahan ng Secretary of Health.
So this is not unusual to have
It's not
a certificate
unusual.
of
It
exemption.
happened for polio vaccine. It happened for, I think, cervical cancer vaccine. I'm not sure. Rotavirus vaccine, inactivated polio vaccine. I'm not even sure if it happened for pentavalent vaccine. Marami, Japanese encephalitis vaccine.
So these issues seem to be, again, technical and scientific, and they can still be threshed out also because the Volunteers Against Crime and Corruption said that there are other cases also still pending. The regional trial court case
copy and paste, pinalitan lang yung pangalan. So, copy and paste yung mga kaso, pinalitan lang yung mga pangalan. Because it's actually harassment. So, it was harassment. It was a mixture of many aspects. May harassment, may, sabihin na natin, pinulitika ang kalusugan because I was a member of the cabinet of the Pinoy administration. Though we were not politically aligned at the local level, being a cabinet of the former president, and then a new president came in, Duterte, whose people around him wanted to demonize the former president, not to mention the fact that the issue of Dengvaxia became a cover-up for many scandals, corruption, and issues actually happening during the previous administration. So parang naging panakep. So every time, because tagos sa puso ng tao, I mean, coming out in the open with somebody wiping blood in his scrub suit and then pretending to have done autopsies, it was actually a picture of death being presented to the parents. So sino ba namang tatay or nanay ang hindi matatakot? Although alam ng marami na hindi totoo, andun kasi yung takot, yung fear. And that's actually a mortal sin. Because now people are dying of dengue, not only dengue. We had the polio outbreak, the measles outbreak, the pertussis outbreak, Japanese encephalitis outbreak, and even in the few years, we might have an outbreak of hepatocellular carcinoma because of the reduction in vaccine confidence.
So there are other cases of Dengvaxia still pending. And right now, there's also a case in the Sandigan Bayan for technical malversation, which was also filed against you.
And that's actually Karen.
Okay, we'll be going to that question because this involves around 3.55 billion worth of Dengvaxia vaccines that were procured. And this was, again, in your capacity as Department of Health Secretary. So are you confident that you'll also get an acquittal on this? But before you answer that question, Congresswoman Janette, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. Congresswoman Janette, before the break, we were asking you, so there are still Dengvaxia cases pending against you. And right now, there's also a case in the Sandigan Bayan for technical malversation.
Yes.
Are you confident that this will also lead to an acquittal?
Well, since it's pending, I cannot talk about it. But just to be exact, when we talk about technical malversation, to laymanize it, nakalaan yung pondo sa isang bagay at ginamit mo sa ibang bagay. So the SARO, when the SARO or the budget for dengue vaccine was released to us, it was quite specific that it will be implemented in the 3 areas with highest incidence of dengue mortality and morbidity. So that was NCR, Region 3, and Region 4A. When my successor came in, I'm not sure, I think in 2017, they expanded the implementation to Region 7. And the certificate of exemption was issued by Secretary Ubial. So, Attorney Karen, lawyers very much know what that means. So, ang nakakagulat lang doon kasi ako yung kinasuhan ng technical malversation for an incident that did not happen during my tenure. Because the expansion to Region 7 was done by Secretary Ubial and her team. with the same members of the Formulary Executive Council. So, siya, ganun talaga eh. That's the risk of serving the government. No? It's, good programs can be politicized. Where in fact, the former president, Noynoy Aquino, was just bent on health equity. Kasi parang hindi niya matanggap na karamihan ng mga bakuna ay parang binibigay muna sa mayayaman. Andun lang nagkakaroon yung mahihirap. And if you look at, there are actually two sides of the coin. There were doctors claiming to really be advocates of public health. But if you look at the bigger situation, ang paulit-ulit nilang sinasabi, bakit i-allow na bilhin ng gobyerno? Bakit hindi muna yung mga private na mga doktor ang mag-implement? Imagine you're talking about 9 to 45 years old. That's a big niche of our population. Siyempre, hanap buhay yun ng mga doktor na gustong magbakuna at sumingil ng malaki, just like cervical cancer. The Department of Health used to buy it. I think the offer was 880. We did not allow because during that time, isa pala ang supplier. So it was reduced to 660 pesos. But in the private clinics, you would pay how much? 3,000 pesos. So syempre, ayaw nung iba, I'm not referring to all, marami ang matitinong mga doktor. Pero merong iba, gusto nila private muna. Kasi pag maubos mo yung market na makakabayad, yung talagang walang pambayad, yun na yung babakunahan ng gobyerno. But that's not health equity. Nakakalungkot na parang dito sa Pilipinas, you will be tied with the mantra that let the vaccination happen in the private sector. Parang COVID testing. Buong mundo, lahat ng bansa, libre na ang testing. Sa atin, private labs muna. Later on na yung gobyerno, tapos mga negosyante pa ang nag-donate sa ating government hospitals. Why are we going to pass that burden to our people?
And this is a good segue to this current issue on the PhilHealth funds that are available, but now are being sought to transfer to the Treasury or the unprogrammed funds of the government. What is your stand on that? You're not only a legislator, but also a doctor. Yeah. Do you think that's appropriate?
Two things, Karen. We really have to look at the bigger situation. Kung ito ay pera ng members ng PhilHealth, talaga namang hindi dapat ibalik sa gobyerno. Pero kung ito ay excess payment, because I was also the chairman of the board of PhilHealth before. In fact, dahil nga palang kulit-kulit ni Tony Liachon, nirekomenda siya at inappoint ng presidente, but he pretended to be independent. He was part of the board of PhilHealth. So, what was the problem? Ang humihingi ng subsidy ang PhilHealth sa national government. Maglilista sila dyan. Okay, 7.7 million senior citizens. Ito yung mga mahihirap, 25 million. Lista ng numero. But during the actual implementation, actual people, yung isang pangalan o isang tao, 3 beses na uulit. Papalitan lang yung iba. If it's Janette Garin, it becomes Jane Garin, or it becomes Janette Garin. Pero isang tao lang. So triple payment yun or double payment. Kaya ang nangyayari, kung magbibigay ng subsidy ang national government, yung actual people hindi nagtutugma. And I believe that's the fund that is being discussed, excess payment. Now, on the issue of PhilHealth, yes, ang daming dapat gawin, ang daming mga magagandang gawin. But the problem is, nagagawa ba? Kasi we have to have good people in PhilHealth. We have to have people inside who does not have any interest for themselves. Kasi narinig din natin paulit-ulit yung PhilHealth fraud. Kaya nga, during my time, we created the program of Medical Assistance Program, which is now MAIFIP. Yung pinamimigay na kinukuha ng mga guarantee letters, we did this because the process inside PhilHealth at the time was very slow. And let us look at the COVID situation. Ano yung unang inatupag ng PhilHealth? Testing. Magkano ang presyo? 8,250 pesos per COVID test? But worldwide, there's a WHO formula which will actually point back to 1,500 to 2,000 pesos per test. Dapat yung testing kapag may pandemic, gobyerno ang gumagawa, libre at walang bayad because that's our weapon to be able to see our enemies. Mata natin yun eh. Kaya if we go back, the funds, the excess subsidy na walang actual people should be reverted. And PhilHealth has around 480, almost 500 million reserves. that should be utilized kasi marami ang kailangan. But in the process, it's not overnight because you have to craft packages. I even volunteered, ang sabi ko kay President Mandy, because he really wants to reform PhilHealth. Pero ando doon kasi yung isa lang siya plus a few other people. We need more people to come into PhilHealth. We need the specialty societies to help PhilHealth craft packages. At iyan ang totoong sitwasyon. Kung patutulugin mo ng matagal yung pera doon, tapos lumipas na. Because that happened during my time. They were saying, i-retroactive yung payment ng senior citizens. You cannot do that. Again, that's technical malversation kasi ito yung taon na ito, i-enroll mo yung isang tao 3 beses or 4 na beses just because there's subsidy coming from the national government. That's a no-no.
And you're not worried that with these funds going to the government and being taken away from PhilHealth, that money can be lost? Meaning, hindi mababalik ng government to PhilHealth?
PhilHealth is almost 500 billion reserve. Not to mention na bawat taon, nag-i-infuse ang national government for membership, for subsidy, yung payment ng premium. Kaya, hindi siya mawawala. Ang sabi kasi ng iba, baka malugi ang PhilHealth, dapat ibigay yan sa mga packages ng tao. Hindi nga nila magalaw-galaw yung 500 billion because that is just the reserve. They have the actual contributions and the actual payment of premiums before PhilHealth now. So, ano ang magandang gawin? Dapat tingnan ngayon, and I actually recommended to PhilHealth and even told Secretary Herbosa, dapat kunin na muna natin, let us invite all the former officials to sit down and recommend, and the specialty societies. Kasi kulang rin sila ng tao. Let's say if we talk about renal transplant, the package there is 600,000. Tapos, i-approve pa, ang dami pang approval. Hindi naman magiging fraud yan kasi yung nagpa-transplant, makikita mo talaga yan. But the cost there is a minimum of 1 to 1.5 million. Yeah. So you have to increase that package. In cancer treatment pulls down a family. No, ang problema kasi, ang cancer ngayon is chronic na. Yeah. May pambayad ka lang, mabubuhay ka. Wala na yung panahon na pag may cancer ka, death sentence yon. So PhilHealth should have to play an active role. Now, the money there is so much na hindi nagagamit. Let's start with crafting the packages so that by the last quarter of this year, tuloy-tuloy na yan. The projected is that they will be using probably 180 million out of the almost billion out of the almost 500.
So Congresswoman Janette, I think at least with that, there's potential solutions to use PhilHealth funds at the reserves in order to improve the health packages without jeopardizing any of the amounts that will be transferred to the government. And since we're on the topic of budget, you recently pacified a situation during the budget hearing for the budget of the Office of the Vice President. You were able to pacify Congressman Marcoleta and Congressman Paduano.
Yeah.
What was going on in your head during that time? But before you answer that question, we'll have to take a short break. At the Forefront, we'll be right back. Welcome back at the Forefront. So when you pacified the tension between Congressman Marcoleta and Congressman Paduano during the budget hearing for the Office of the Vice President, what was going through your mind?
Well, this usually happens. This usually happens because it's part of legislation. And both of them are my friends. So we have worked together a long, long way back with Congressman Marcoleta and Congressman Paduano. They both have the same intention, and that's participating. It's just unfortunate that emotions blew up simply because Congressman Marcoleta wanted to terminate. Congressman Paduano wanted to continue the deliberation, even in the absence of the Vice President, considering that we're already members listed and there were people from DBM and I believe the Commission and Audit.
And there have been motions in the hearings for both the Office of the President and the Office of the Vice President that there should be no more questions or they can skip the questioning because of this time-honored principle of parliamentary courtesy. What is your stand on that
Well,
principle?
parliamentary courtesy really exists, but it depends. It comes on a case-to-case situation. Like in the office of the president, the executive secretary is there. So the executive secretary represents the president in all the budget hearings. That's the situation. So if the executive secretary, and there are no major questions, then parliamentary courtesy can be extended. In the case of the office of the vice president, the motion should have been put forward during the start of the deliberation, yung unang hearing. But it did not happen kasi nga magulo na rin eh. No? So that motion should have been put forward during the start of the hearing. And plus the fact that, of course, the Makabayan Bloc is also insisting, I believe they were able to have a copy of the COA findings. I don't have a copy, so I cannot talk about it. But that was the situation. So, and then COA was there. So it was a very difficult situation for the presiding officer.
And there are some allegations that a lot of the attacks on the office of the vice president, including Vice President Sara Duterte herself, is coming from Speaker Martin Romualdez. Your deputy majority leader, what is your take on this?
Yeah, well, it's very early to play politics at this point of time that we're talking about the 2028 election. But on a personal note, I haven't heard or even seen or maski konting duda, hindi ko nakikita, nasasabihan ako ni Speaker ng, oh, eto, banatan nyo si VP. Kasi sa dami ng ginagawa, sa dami ng trabaho, and it's a day-to-day thing, and there are a lot of hearings and legislative work happening. I believe lahat kasi ito, ang naging problema dun sa confidential fund. And there were, what's very difficult is that when people come to Congress or when people come to Congress with a preconditioned mind, yun ang mahirap. Kasi like, I was even put, if you saw it during the first hearing, my interpellation focused on the social services lodged within her office. And in fact, my last question is, in the history of Congress, was there ever a resource person who was cited for contempt or who was detained during a budget briefing? Hindi pa nga siya hearing eh. Budget briefing. I put that forward kasi ang daming nagbubulong-bulungan. And even the Vice President said na hindi na niya pinapunta yung mga kasamahan niya kasi baka i-detain. So I had to clear that matter. But then others were putting mali, sabi nila ipapakontempt daw. No, I was placing the premise, I was putting the premise that you do not contempt a person during a budget briefing. And the answer of the presiding chairman was never. So we wanted to put that in context. Pero syempre hindi na intindihan na ng iba.
Well, recently, Mayor Mabilog said that he's going to come back and face the trial for supposedly drug case allegations. And there seems to be, at least here,
Mayor Mabilog.
Mabilog, yes.
Yeah.
He was implying that this is also harassment or prosecution. You seem to be in that same position where you also said that all these Dengvaxia cases are also harassment. Do you think that Mayor Mabilog would get also a fair chance of...
Definitely. I've known Mayor Mabilog for a long, long time. Hindi pa siya mayor. Napakamalumana. He's very active in NGO work. He's very active. We share the same passion and advocacies. Kaya nagulat ako when he was pictured as a drug protector or part of the drug syndicate. What we know at the local level, ito nga yung mga bulong-bulong eh. Kaya dapat nananagot yung mga taong taga-intriga. What happened there, I think there was an event organizer for a Duterte campaign who probably tinipid yung generator na dapat 3 na nirentahan naging 1. So nung pumutok yung generator, gumawa-gawa na ng kwento. And the victim of that marites is actually Mayor Jed Mabilog. So, napakahirap ng pinagdaanan niya. I'm just, sometimes you see me smiling and everything, but deep inside, we experience the same. And my heart goes out for the scientists and the doctors who were not prepared for this. I had to be tough. I had to come out. I had to answer because truth is on our side. But moreover, these Filipino scientists who were recruited several times by other countries, but who chose to serve our country, were dragged into the case without even participation. And why? Simply because there were people who were envious of them. There were people who wanted to create chaos in public health, or there was politicking and confusion happening all over.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Janette Garin. We really appreciate your time. Unfortunately, it was a bit too short, even if it was an hour. But thank you again for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for inviting me.
Congresswoman Janette Garin's recent acquittal from the Dengvaxia controversy is the first step to finally seeing the end to an already procrastinated issue. While the Dengvaxia mess is not yet over, she thinks it is moving towards culmination. As a former health secretary, she believes that the DOH still has a lot of things to do to improve the country's healthcare system and the delivery of health services to Filipinos. Be timely informed, be insightful of the news. Always stay at the forefront. Join us again tomorrow for meaningful conversations that would help you form an objective personal opinion. This is Attorney Karen Jimeno. Thank you for spending your hour with us.